God's law, this will be the best law for them, right? This is the law which will be something that is beneficial for them, which will help them to be successful in this life, successful in the hereafter, isn't it? Now, if some people say, but I don't want to follow religion, I don't want to follow a prescribed law, I don't want to worship at certain times, I don't want to fast, I don't want to give charity, many things, these people, do you really think they're actually loving God?
And I agree with you. You know why? Because this is the thing. Sometimes, being with God is an intimacy thing, yeah? It's not, I'm going to have, let's say you and me were married, yeah? And he's my husband, and I'm going to tell him, I love him, but I don't do nothing to him. I don't cook for him, I don't do his clothes love. It's the same with, like we're doing, God, I love him, but I don't pray for him.
You're not expressing that love.
I don't desire the love. And we need to do that. We need to desire the love. Do something.
So we all agree there's a lot of work to do between ourselves, to people who don't believe, people who made up their own religion, people who worship themselves, people who worship pop stars, footballers, people who right, or people who don't worship anything at all and they think they are all self-sufficient, right? That's one thing. But between ourselves, though, there's one thing that we all need to do is, are we really loving the way we should love God?
That's a good question.
Yeah?
That is an amazing question.
Right. Is there anything that God doesn't like?
There's things that God doesn't like. But listen, this is my confession, and that's what I think. I don't want to put like in each one of you in your heads that God hates something or God doesn't like something. That is, I think, it's something personal. Yeah, it's literally something personal.
It's also written. It's also written.
Yeah. But I don't want to put it in a person like, listen, God. No. Like God spoke to me. God spoke to me through verbs. God has spoken to me through people. God has spoken to me through situations. Yeah. So it's like I know inside of me that some things God doesn't like me to do, and I know sometimes I have to go through that.
Sure. The reason why I say this, I mean, I don't want to apologize for saying this, but it's important to say it. We want to worship God, but within this desire for worship, there are many people who worship God in their own ways, which is not acceptable to God. Or they worship God along with others, and they worship God besides God. There are many people who do that. Hindus, they worship so many different gods and avatars, or semi-gods or demigods. They spend their time, dedicating their whole life, some of them, to worship God alone. Alone meaning only worship God. But instead what they do in this process, they might worship a cow, thinking this is a representation of God and so on, not knowing that God doesn't approve of that. Or, for example, Christians, I don't know whether you are monotheist Christians or Trinitarian Christians, people worship Christ instead of worshipping the God of Christ. This is very important to reflect between us. What in our Quran, which came after Christ, right, this book to Prophet Muhammad, it says very clearly that whoever associates partners with God, whether you associate partner with your own self, that I should be worshipped with God, or you say God has a daughter or a son or a brother or a mother, or anything that you associate, God says very clearly, you will never go to paradise, and hellfire will be the final destination, because God doesn't forgive that sin. It is one of the greatest sin to ascribe partner to God. God created you, He's alone, He's one and He's only, and then you say, but I'm going to worship that man or that woman or that tree or that anything. So as Christians, what we would like you to discuss and have common terms with, that let us come to worship none but God alone. The God of Moses, of Abraham, of Jacob and Solomon, God of Jesus and God of Muhammad. If you think Jesus is God, then we can have a discussion. Why do you say so? Because He is a mighty messenger of God who came specifically to bring people back to God, not to worship Him. What do you believe about Him?
No, this is the thing, yeah? The thing is, we know only there's not only one human on earth, yeah? We are a lot of people in here, and we know the world is literally run by the devil. Are we agreeing with this?
Not necessarily, I wouldn't.
So if
don't believe God runs by the
if it's run by the devil,
Devil has limitations.
we need to be really strong in our faith. And not just that, if I see a person that is worshipping that tree, and I know it's not right, yeah? I know it's not right, I will pray for that person. I'm not going to condemn that person, because that's not my comment. God is the one that do it. He's the judge, not me. So I would just go to that person and be like, listen, I start praying for that person, fasting for that person. That is showing my love to that person. Until that person seriously have that relationship with God. Yeah? I understand that obviously you believe in Muhammad, and that's fine. We believe in Muhammad as well. That you believe in Jesus too, we believe in Jesus as well. Yeah? But the thing is, I don't want to feel aligned like, there you go, Jesus is the way and the life, and that's the way we think. Jesus is the way and the life, yeah? And that's what it says in the Bible. That's why I believe. The only thing, yeah, that we're going to know what is really happening in our convictions. Listen, this is the thing I think. You're really faithful to God, yeah? Faithful to God. Regardless if you read the Quran, if you're Buddhist, if you're this, you're faithful to what you do. No one in here knows in the day of judgment what is going to happen. No one knows. No one knows what's going to happen after death. No one knows. No one. No one has been in hell and come back and tell us what happened. No one knows. So we're the only one. We're literally here just living this period of time because we live in eternity. And I know our souls, when you go to sleep, your soul is still awake. Your body is sleeping. That's why we could be praying the whole day, but your body's tired. Your body wants to eat. Your body wants to be stuff. But it's like, we live in just this little time, and we live in eternity. And like, God, please help me to live this eternal life now. My eternal life starts now. So it's like, regardless of what you believe or what you think, I feel like our language has to be love. Our language has to be love. And that is
I can understand and appreciate what you were saying, but when it comes to God and His messengers, are we giving the right of God where it's due? Or are we the example? Because one of the crucial, central difference between Muslims and Christians is on the position of the identity of Christ. Do we agree? We believe Christ was born of a virgin. He was a mighty messenger, a prophet of God. He did many miracles with the permission and authority of God. God gave him the permission to do those miracles.
But do you think you can do the same? Do you think you can heal people? Do you think you can heal the blind? You can. Do you get what I mean?
No, I understand. No.
You can do it, and I believe I can do it.
Fair enough. But what I'm saying is, when we identify someone, a prophet of God, this is what we say the Christians have. I'm not sure whether you are of this denomination of the Christians. Christians generally have extolled and excelled and elevated the status of Jesus Christ, who is an honorable messenger, mighty messenger. You know, if a Muslim disrespects and disbelieves in Jesus Christ, he's not even a Muslim. This is how, we have to honor and respect our prophets of God. We make no distinction between our prophets and messengers. God favors some over the others. He makes this distinction. He spoke to Moses directly. He didn't speak to everyone else directly. There are other prophets, but he didn't speak to them directly. So some he favored on something over the others. So when it comes to the identity of Christ, there are many Christians who have elevated him to the station of saying he is actually God's son, and being God's son, he's actually son of God, that he's actually God himself and requires our worship and gratitude like God does. So God has become our Father, and he has a Son, and there's a Holy Spirit, and then we need to actually worship them all. If you look at consistently in the times in the past where God sent prophets and messengers to Isaiah, to Jacob, to Solomon, to David, to Moses, God says, I am God and there is none else. Before me there is no God form, and after me there will be no other God form. I alone am God and there is no one else, so worship me and serve me only. These are the messages that we get consistently. But here is the problem with the Christian understanding of these things. Christians say, no, God isn't the only one. He has a Son who is also God. He also requires our worship. This is not the message God sent beforehand. So we say, look, I know you love Christ so much. I mean, I can understand that, but don't elevate him to station of God. Imagine Jewish people elevated Prophet Moses to God and started worshipping him. You would say, that's too much reverence. You can't do